Now, WSAV presents this Storm Team 3 Stormwatch Advisory.
Well, good Saturday morning, everyone. I'm Storm Team 3 meteorologist Alyssa Carsley, and this is
Kyle Dennis.
We are back again to talk about the tropics. We have new updates this morning. The 5 a.m. came out, obviously, at 5 a.m. with big updates for Isaias. But the biggest one today is that look at the western side of it. It's not even that detailed.
Right, all the the oranges and the reds, that's the highest cloud top. So that's where you're seeing the strongest thunderstorms, and all of that is east of the center. We've been talking about that for a couple of days.
Exactly.
Too.
I mean, you came in this morning and you were like, where's the center? Because
right.
You really can't see it. There's so much dry air on that western side, which is just shearing the western side apart. This is actually what will lead to some good news for us, because as it makes its way up the East Coast, whether it does make landfall in Florida or not, we're still going to be on the weaker side of the system.
Right. It'd be more concerning, I think, at this point, if it was maybe coming up from the Gulf of Mexico.
Right.
And crossing over, kind of doing like that Hurricane track where we actually had like a tornado outbreak. We're on that east side of the storm. And with this particular one, the west side is even weaker than what we often see with these kinds of storms. And the more it interacts with the east coast of Florida, the more it's actually going to weaken on that west side. And they're going to see effects before we will. So that is, we still have to watch this closely, but for us, we're glad that the worst of it looks like it's going to stay on.
I mean, we're not ruling out any scenarios right now, but it just looks so much better compared to if it was completely formed with all that wraparound moisture on both sides.
Right.
And look at our water vapor. You see all the oranges and reds? That's dry air, and that dry air is trying its best to battle its way into the center to weaken the storm. And while a little bit of it is, it's really not, because as of 5 a.m. this morning, it's still Category 1, strengthened a little bit overnight when they're now up to 85 miles per hour. So that's something we're going to be tracking, especially to see how much of that dry air moves into the center to weaken the storm over the next day. Right.
These storms have both an inflow and an outflow. So you see all that dry air on the west side, it has to pull in the air from around it, and it's pulling in dry air, that's going to inhibit its development. So that's also one limiting factor, and that's why we have not seen it ramp up to Category 2, which was originally a possibility in this particular location that it's in now.
Right. Another big update this morning is the track. Now it's starting to slow down a little bit. Now it's moving to the northwest at 12 miles per hour. I believe yesterday when we did this, it was 17 miles per hour. So it is starting to slow down a little bit. And Kyle, if you just play forward to see the track, it's reaching the southeast coast of Florida tomorrow morning. So it is greatly slowing down. In fact, I believe a few tracks ago, it was reaching the central Florida area by Sunday morning. So it's starting to slow down, and then by Monday morning, it's close to the Jacksonville area, not even reaching the closest approach to us until Monday afternoon, Monday evening. Now, the tropical storm status is still staying the same, but the timeline for it has shifted a little bit back.
Right, which means, we could see some rain tomorrow just because, we get like kind of that flow around it, kind of a coastal trough that can enhance some rain, almost like an indirect, rain from the storm. But any direct impacts that we're going to see would hold off likely until Monday.
And you can see with the cone, it did shift a little bit more to the east this morning. And again, we're staying on that western side. So if it does do a scenario 1 where it just moves right up the coastline, we're still on that western side where we're not going to be seeing the strongest winds, the heaviest rain. So it is good news for us. So here are scenarios that we've been thinking about. Scenario 1 makes its way right up the coastline. I think it's more going to be a scenario 2, scenario 3.
Right. It's not that we're necessarily ruling out number 1. Here's the thing, though, with number 1. While that does bring the storm closest to us of all 3 scenarios, it would more likely interact with land first down over the east coast of Florida before reaching us, which would weaken the storm even more. So even though it would come closer to us, it would be weaker when it gets here. So there's really not a scenario we're watching right now where we take a direct hit from a hurricane, and that's really been the case for several days.
Right, and that's the good news, is that we're not going to get a direct hit. While we could still see tropical storm force wind along the coastline, heavy rain, it's not going to be a worst case scenario. But again, we're still not ruling out completely scenario 1. We're going to see exactly what that dry air does to the center of the hurricane first, to see if it continues to weaken it as it moves up the coast of Florida. So that's something we're going to be watching. But right now, I really do think we're going to get more of a 2 situation.
Right. So with scenario 2, we're talking about a moderate impact. We would have a period of heavy rain. So, like I said, that could actually start tomorrow, just kind of out ahead of it. But any direct rain that we would get from the storm would mainly be on Monday. some heavy rain, some wind, and as far as the wind goes, we'd be talking about possibly tropical storm force wind gusts. Even the sustained tropical storm force wind looks mainly to stay out over the ocean.
Right.
So, I mean, that's another good thing. There would be coastal issues. I mean, you got to remember, as the storm's approaching, you got an onshore wind. And depending on the timing of the storm, you know, we were talking about the closest approach being Monday morning during low tide.
Yeah.
You know, if it comes in a little bit later on Monday, there could be a little bit more in the way of some coastal flooding with that. And then with scenario 3, obviously, the farther east it ends up going, the better. And some of our new models, Alyssa, we're showing, we were just looking at this, where maybe it kind of comes right near the coast of Florida, maybe even makes landfall in the central to South Florida coast, and then gets picked up by a trough to the north, turning it northeast a little bit sooner. So we actually could get a combination
of 2 and 3,
or kind of a blend of all of them even. Where it comes close to Florida down there with number 1, and then it ends up at number 3 by the time it comes up here. So there, you know, there can kind of be a combination. These are kind of, you know, the 3 main categories that we're watching.
We've set up for, you know, Monday, and that was another big thing. Again, I just want to mention that the timeline has pushed back because pretty much the past few days we've been talking about, oh, Sunday night into Monday morning. Well, that's now pushed back to Monday morning to Monday evening.
And that's a thing that I think a lot of people overlook when they look at the cone, because everyone wants to know, where's the track? How close is it coming? But you also have to consider the timing, because obviously if it comes in during high tide, that's a bigger problem along the coast with coastal flooding and storm surge. And if it comes in during low tide, like, you know, with Dorian, we didn't even get to flood stage with that, even on its closest approach, when we had our strongest onshore wind. So, you know, pushing it back a little later into Monday, even if it's a weaker storm, may actually mean a little bit more impact along the coast.
Right. So I'm checking Facebook here. Everyone's saying good morning.
Good morning.
Someone asked why I'm using the phone during the broadcast. I'm just checking Facebook. I'm watching it live so I can answer all you guys.
Yes, this
all
is
your
how
questions.
we're getting your comments.
Right.
We're not paying attention to you, we promise.
No, I'm over here texting. No. Someone was asking about a storm surge threat on the barrier islands of South Carolina. Thank you, Michelle, for that question. So like what Kyle said, it's going to be coming up the east coast of Florida. And as it does so, we're still going to get that onshore wind. What that means, especially if we have that onshore wind come in strongest at times of high tide, we could see some coastal issues, whether it's coastal flooding or storm surge. Now, I think it's a little bit too early to discuss the exact extent of storm surge for our entire coastline, but I do think at least it's something to think about, especially going into the night tonight into tomorrow. Right.
You know, if you live along the coast, if you live on the barrier islands, if you live in a flood-prone area, you need to continue to watch this. Oftentimes, the storm surge is the part of the forecast that, while it can be very destructive, it's often we're least confident about because, you know, in advance. We're talking a couple days ahead of time because it really comes down to the timing. Are we at high tide? Is the tide coming in? Or are we past the peak and it's going out? There's so many variables that contribute to what we ultimately see in terms of storm surge. But I would say, you know, if you look at the wind here, you know, you see how the center of the storm is kind of on the western edge of the tropical storm and hurricane force wind. You know, right now we're looking at most of that tropical storm force wind east of the center. That's going to be the case even when it reaches us. But because of the shape of the coastline, you know, Chatham County and down in the south, you kind of bend in more, so a little more protected. But as you get up into the low country, you can see how the coast starts bending a little bit more to, you know, outward toward the northeast. I would say, you know, the higher storm surge threat would likely be, you know, in places, you know, up in the low country.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, Hilton Head Island, places like that, up through Charleston. I think that's where there will be a little bit more impact from wind. And we're talking about maybe sustained tropical storm force wind for a period Monday lunchtime through the early to mid-afternoon.
Right.
And if the sustained winds stay offshore, it's still the possibility of at least gusts, you know, over 39, 40 miles per hour.
Yeah, but I think this is a good graphic to use to show that a lot of those stronger winds are on that other side of the system compared to where we are, because look at that big portion of the yellow that doesn't match up. Is not symmetrical.
It's not symmetrical
at all.
Exactly.
And that's what we saw on water vapor, on satellite, is that it is one half is so much larger, so much stronger than the other.
Right.
So here's what really changed this morning with the 5 a.m. update. The track was shifted a little bit more east. However, it's now showing a slower speed as it moves up the Florida Peninsula. As of right now, what we are tracking for here, just enhanced rain chances for Monday because of how much slower the speed is going to be going into when it comes up towards us. We're still thinking tropical storm force winds, especially right along the coastline.
Right.
But the impacts now are mainly Monday into Monday evening.
Right. So a little bit later timing. And the timing can still kind of change a little bit by give or take a couple of hours.
Yeah.
And as far as the storm surge effects, it's really going to come down to that exact timing. That's the variable here that we're going to have to watch just continuously as we get closer and fine tune the timing.
That was definitely something we watched last year with Dorian for sure. We watched. We had 2 high tides. I remember when it was coming up because it was so slow. Now this storm's not going to be Dorian slow. It's not going to be moving at 5 miles per hour.
That was
not at all.
Brutal.
It really was.
Yeah.
This storm will be moving a little bit faster than that, so we'll be able to at least, I think, at least one time per high tide we can expect somewhat of a elevated tide.
Right. Right, and Dorian's track certainly was close enough to give us a significant storm surge. The saving grace was the timing.
Right, exactly.
So that's why we have to watch this closely, because even a day before Dorian, we weren't necessarily like, oh, okay, we're good with the storm, so that's not going to happen.
No.
We still were, thinking that there was a good chance because, again, that track certainly had the potential to produce it. So, and this one does too. It's just going to come down to the timing.
Kyle, if we could go back to the 3 scenarios, because people are asking exactly what Savannah can expect, Isle of Wight, and Midway. So here's what we're thinking. So we have 3 scenarios here. Scenario 1 is a higher impact if it makes its way right up the coastline. Scenario 2, more like a Dorian track. Now, of course, every storm is different. We still could see heavy rain, wind, at least tropical storm force wind gusts along our coastline, and coastal issues. And in scenario 3, talking about low impact, some rain and a gusty breeze. And we were just talking about how we think it's going to be possibly a mix of all 3 with the newest models coming out.
Right.
Showing it possibly making landfall in Florida, and then that trough just picking up and taking it pretty much in the track of 2 and 3.
Right.
But overall, I'm thinking it's going to be somewhere between scenario 2 and scenario 3 as it gets closest to us. So what we can expect with that, I think, is going to be some heavy rain as well as tropical storm force wind gust along the coast.
Right, and if you're along the coast, obviously you're going to be closest to the storm compared to everyone else.
Right.
So that's why you have the potential for the winds along the coast. You have the potential to see more rain. I would say probably in terms of the rain, we're looking at some of the latest model guidance. The low country probably sees more rain than areas further to the southeast, because you'll probably end up a little bit closer to the storm track up there. So, we're still kind of in the early stages of forecasting the exact rain amounts, but right now, we're kind of still speculating maybe 3 to 6 inches, 2 to 4, something like that in the low country, and then something maybe
slowly
in the 1 to 3.
backing it off as we get closer, farther down to our inland areas and in the coastal empire.
So in terms of all the impacts we're expecting, I think the low country has the chance to see the most rain compared to everyone else, along with the wind, especially along the coast.
I agree with that. Oh.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, the next update comes out in less than an hour at 11 a.m. We'll have a new track, a new advisory. So I'm interested to see with the new track if it's a little bit more east or if they've just kept it the same because of new models still coming out with the latest updates.
Right. We get updates in the 2s, 8s, 5s, 11s, and the 5s and 11s are the big ones where they, if they are going to make any big changes, that's when the National Hurricane Center tends to make the bigger adjustments. Any other questions or anything we can answer?
No, everyone's just asking exactly what the 3 scenarios were we just described. Everyone's saying thank you so much, you're welcome. We enjoy doing this because it makes it easier, especially right now since we aren't able to give specifics about rainfall totals or winds. Thank you, wind gusts.
We're getting there.
I know. I didn't.
See, Alyssa doesn't drink coffee.
I don't drink coffee. He's been trying to convince me I can't. I just don't get. I can't get into it. Anyway, so these are our 3 scenarios that we are thinking about right now.
All right. So there you go. If we don't have any more questions right now, this is live right now as of 10:13. If you're seeing this later in the day, we can still see your comments and respond later even when we're not live. So keep them coming.
So one more comment. Eric said with the Bermuda high and cold front, the trough that's coming off the east coast, doesn't it shift it more east if the Bermuda high is strong enough? Yeah, so that's kind of the same, that's kind of the same scenario in a lot of these storms. There's usually a Bermuda high this time of the year, somewhere out over the Atlantic, which directs these storms around. Sometimes when they're really strong, when these storms are further east, they direct them due west into the Gulf of Mexico. And if they get into this area, it's a matter of, okay, well, how strong is the high? How far west does it build in? Or how far east does it go? Because we need that high to slide farther east to get the storm, on that further offshore track. So
the timing and the back and forth between that front and the high, the strength of the high, the timing of the cold front, all of that plays a role in exactly which track ultimately happens.
Exactly.
So if you're even off a little bit with the forecast for one of those variables, it completely changes everything else.
Right, especially with East Coast storms, the cold fronts that come off the East Coast or a trough really help determine where is it going to go. Is the cold front coming off fast enough where it can be pushed out in the Atlantic? Is it slowing down a little bit where we get more into a scenario 1? So it's looking like they're both going to act together to at least give us 2 and 3.
Right. And forecasting these storms, it's a process. Everyone wants to know how much rain, look, 5 days, 10 days in advance. The reason you can't do that is because it's kind of a process of elimination. You look at all of these scenarios, and as you get closer, you see, okay, this clearly is not developing. We can eliminate that. We can eliminate this. We can eliminate 1. We can eliminate 2. Okay, it's going to be 3. It's kind of like that, and it's a process in terms of the closer you get to the approach of the storm, the more and more you know until ultimately you know exactly what's going to happen.
And once we get our top scenario, then we're able to find out the details, iron out all the little wrinkles of how much rain we're going to get, how strong the winds are going to be. So it's just like you said, just finding out the details and everything.
Hopefully someday, week to 10 days in advance, we'll be able to say, okay, this is how much rain's going to fall.
Right. We wish we knew that. Right. It would help us out so much.
Unfortunately, the science isn't quite that far.
No.
It has come a long way,
It has.
The forecasts have gotten a lot better. The forecast cone, the width of the cone is based on the average error in the forecast for hurricanes, and it's not a situational thing. It's not based on the uncertainty within each particular storm. It's not based on the model spread for each storm. It's based on statistics, and this is the narrowest cone that we've ever seen. The cone width is fixed at the beginning of each season based on a running 5-year track error. This is the narrowest cone, meaning we've seen the most accurate forecasts over the last 5 years.
Right. So everything's just continuing to improve every single year.
All right. Well, if we have no other questions now.
No, but someone said, this is good. That's good news. David Mills says, you guys should dress down more often.
I would love that.
I always feel bad for Kyle having to wear a suit.
Especially in the summer, too. It's okay in the morning, but then, once I leave work, it's like, oh, my God.
Oh, yeah. You're just poor start
Then you get
sweating.
in a hot car. Yeah. I had to get mulch after work yesterday and
Oh,
my
man.
suit. My girlfriend, Rachel, she sent me to Home Depot to get the mulch. I'm not going to say no. So I'm out there in my suit, sweating, almost falling over. But, we're good.
As long as you're okay.
I'm okay. So now I'm in short sleeves. I actually need to get more today. So
there you go.
Back to Home Depot.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. No other questions?
No.
We're going to wrap this up now that we're rambling. I've had a lot of coffee, as you can tell. We will answer your questions throughout the day.
Yeah, thanks.